welcome back to my author commentary for A Prince of Song and Shade. Today we're up to chapter 37, where we have ostensibly a quieter scene, but there are a few things going on under the surface that I'm interested in talking about and highlighting, I guess, from an author perspective. The scene is one in which Talyn and Theac are on guard duty watching the prince as he engages in kind of a reception with the Montagni nobles. Part of the promise that Cuinn made to Azrilan in return for getting Talyn returned to the wolves was that he would essentially show up to all these events in Arater on behalf of the Mithranar crown so that Azrilan could do his own thing. So one of the first things I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit is Talyn and Theac observe separately and then kind of discuss together how much contempt that the Montagni nobles have for Cuinn and how kind of obvious they are about it. They don't really try to hide it. And it's an interesting tension or, I guess, contrast because in Mithranar and from Talyn's perspective, having arrived in Mithranar at the beginning of this series and what we've seen of her experience there, the winged folk consider themselves superior to the humans. They consider themselves superior as a race, for want of a better word, because of their magic, because of their wings, because of their wealth. Yet Mithranar is actually quite a small country. The winged folk contingent of that country is smaller again. And beyond that world, beyond that country, that same kind of regard does not exist. The Twin Thrones essentially kind of ignore Mithranar and Montagni, largely because Montagni operates with slavery and the Twin Thrones wants nothing to do with that. Firthland follows in their footsteps. And as far as Montagni is concerned, they find the Mithranar winged folk and the Mithranar nobility beneath their kind of notice. They're a very arrogant in some ways country, or particularly anyway the houses and the nobles. They think they are superior, but in a different way to the Mithranar winged folk. I think they are that belief in their superiority comes from kind of their strength and their power, the power of their economy, the power of their armies, the strength of the men and women who are part of the noble houses. They're more capable than the winged folk rulers, for example. They break a nail and it doesn't bother them so much, kind of thing. Not that that makes them any better, but they certainly have that sense of superiority in a different way than the Mithranars, the winged folk do. And this scene and this visit to Montagni is kind of just to give a little bit of an insight into what the Montagni ruling class kind of looks like, how they behave, and there is a lot more. We dig into that a lot more in Call of the Shadow Rift in the sequel series to A Tale of Stars and Shadow, noting that Kyrie was born and grew up inside that system, and it's not a particularly nice one from my perspective, but it is quite different and distinct from the other countries in this world. So yeah, just wanted to give that little bit more of an insight there. Talyn and Theac also discuss the growing wolf problem, the patience that the wolves have, particularly the Talons. So Cuinn and Zamril, even Talyn, are not losing their ability to just let the slavery thing go. And it's making Talyn realize that they perhaps don't have the discipline that she thought she had instilled in them and that there are limits to the control that she has over them as a military unit. And that's a growing kind of concern for her and Theac. It's interesting that Andros is kind of the one who behaves like a grown-up, and he's always been a little bit more like Talyn than the others. Andros is a little bit more self-assured, a little bit more experienced, and more like-minded than Talyn, I think. And so he has that very same pragmatism, or the ability to kind of be a bit more professional in the surroundings that they're in, that Cuinn and Zamril and Talyn also can't manage, or at least manage yet. They haven't learnt that experience. So it's interesting that Andros is kind of the odd one out there, and Theac obviously too. Theac also has noticed Zamril's comings and goings. Now, Talyn's entirely comfortable with this because she assumes correctly that it's part of what she's tasked Zamril with in terms of helping Halun, helping find his master. Her ultimate plan is that they figure out who his master is and they figure out a way to buy back Halun's contract so that he's no longer an escaped slave and he has the ability to travel into and out of Montagni if he wants to without the risk of being captured, arrested and put back into slavery. What she doesn't know, and what is, as though for those who've read, that's going to become apparent in the next few chapters, is that Zamrel is figured out that Halun's niece is still alive, that she's working as a slave in the palace kitchens, and he's hatching his own plan to rescue Ivani. Of which, if Talyn knew, would be absolutely horrified, but she thinks Zamrel's just up to some other plan that's perfectly fine, and Theac kind of grumbles at her about it, and she's like, no, it's all good, if only she knew. There's also a really quick reference in this chapter to the fact that Azralan and Thera have packed off to the Mananin estates, so that Azralan can enjoy some time with his family. Again, that was a deliberately quick reference, but one there as a little seed for those who are coming back rereading into that gives you a little hint about what Azralan is really up to in Montagni. He's certainly not just there to gamble and spend time with his cousins. He's there to plot or continue further his plan, the one he's working on with Tarkos, in which he takes the thrones of both Montagni and Mithranar. So again, a last little quick reference. It doesn't cast any suspicion anywhere unless you're really, really paying attention. So that's always a bit of fun. Another realization that kind of Talyn comes to as she's standing there as part of the guard, and this is very much a chapter of which standing around staring at for potential danger while on a guard detail allows for a lot of thinking, is that maybe she might not have noticed in the heat of the moment of her argument with Cuinn the night before, but she has subsequently reflected on the fact that he was oddly staunch, oddly angry, oddly firm, completely uncharacteristic for him, and it's got her questioning why the change, or what is it about that situation that had him so uncharacteristically firm. Very first seedlings of realization for her that she will come to by the end of this book around his true identity, but this is one of those little moments that he's kind of broken his cover a little bit, and it's going to have consequences for him. This chapter also introduces two interesting characters, Ariel Swiftwing and his wife Anne Ravensweep. Ariel, as we kind of know, is Mithranar's man. He's a plant, essentially, as Cuinn's friend, so that he basically babysits Cuinn from Mithranar's perspective, keeps an eye on him, makes sure he's not doing anything crazy, reports back to Mithranar on everything that Cuinn does. He's a powerful song mage. He goes along on these diplomatic missions, essentially to smooth the waters, unruffle feathers, make sure everything goes well. His wife Anne also has song magic and essentially forms or feels a similar function, but we don't get as much in this series of what Anne's motivations are in terms of, is she as much Mithranar's man as her husband? Does her loyalty sit somewhere differently? Is she kind of apathetic to the whole thing? And that was deliberate. Anne's a character that will appear again in the next series, in the sequel series, Book of the Doomshroud. Not in the first, but she will come into it later in the series. And she's a character I kind of wanted to have there to play with potentially in future stories. So she's an interesting one from my perspective anyway, as the author. And then finally, at the end of the chapter, as I said, Zamrel has a plot hatching in regards to Halun and Halun's niece, who he has discovered is actually alive and not dead. And he's deliberately kind of paraded the girl in front of Cuinn so that he recognizes her and might take an interest, so that he can then further his plan, which we can discuss as the next few chapters come up. So quite a lot packed into this one, and a few things I wanted to discuss. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions on this chapter or on anything else that we've talked about so far, please drop them in the comments below. Love to chat about it. Otherwise, I really look forward to seeing you in chapter 38, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.